Hello, welcome to another Prysmian fibre optic how-to video. My name is Sandy Many, and today I'm going to show you how to fit a mechanical circular sealing gland to a fibre optic cable with a peripheral Kevlar strength member, such as one of the Prysmian FLEXTUBE range of cables. We'll be using a kit of parts like this. This particular gland covers the cable diameter range 7 to 20 millimeters. There's another gland in the range that covers larger cables in the range 20 to 23 millimeters, but today we will be using this particular gland. Now, it is important that you understand what is the actual diameter of the cable you're fitting the gland to. Now, you can either use a pair of calipers, for example, to measure the diameter of the cable, or you can use the lookup table which follows. Today we will use a 720 fibre FLEXTUBE cable. If you refer back to the table I just showed, this has a nominal diameter of 16.5 millimeters. We will select parts from the gland kit that I showed just now for this diameter. So here I've laid out all of the parts for the mechanical seal medium entry gland, size 7 to 20 millimeters. The Prysmian part number for this is XJTSC01754. So I'll go through and just explain what all the parts are. So this is the medium gland body, and then this is the gland nut. We've then got some spacer here, spacer rings. These are the rubber seals that compress down onto the cable to create a seal. These are the anti-torsional clamps to stop the cable twisting in the gland, and this is the strength member retaining bracket, and this boss fits onto this bracket. The hose clamps here go around the anti-torsional clamps to secure the clamp to the cable, and there's an Allen key and a sachet of silicone grease here that I'll explain in a moment. I'm showing here the instructions that come with each gland kit, and the important thing that we need to look at first is to decide which parts we're going to use out of the kit. This table in section 2 here is important, and I've highlighted the parts that we're going to use based on the size of the cable. So as I mentioned before, the cable is 16.5 millimeters in diameter, so it falls in this range here where I've highlighted it. So for that we're going to use the large seal, so that's this part here, and because then the cable falls in the range 16.5 to 17 millimeters, we actually have 0 spacers, so these spacers are not required for this particular size. And then we need to use the large anti-torsion clip and the large jubilee clip or cable clip. So that's the large anti-torsion clip here and the large cable clip here. We can now go ahead and select the parts we need. So we need the body of the gland, we need the nut, we need the large seal, we need the strength member retention bracket and the boss that fits to it. We need the large anti-torsional clip and the large cable clamp to go around it. Now we recommend that you assemble the gland before you slide it onto the cable. It's easier this way. So the first thing is to take the strength member retention bracket and screw it onto the front of the body of the gland, and this just needs to be finger tight. A good finger tight. Now at this stage we don't fit the boss. The boss goes into this hole here, but we don't fit this at this stage. The seal goes into the back of the gland like this, and then the torsional clip goes into the back here. Now what we do recommend, which isn't shown in the instructions, is that we apply a little bit of silicone grease around this conical section. It makes the gland much easier to tighten. So I'll just show you that now. We take our sachet of silicone grease, we can tear the top off, and we just apply a little bit around here. And just spread it around with your finger. This can now go onto the back, and we slide the nut over the top. And at this stage, obviously, we don't tighten it very much, we just leave it loose, like that. The hose clamp goes over the back here, so that this is now ready for the cable to be slid in from the back end here. We will attach this strength member retention boss only when we're ready to actually secure the strength member to the gland, but for now we can just put it aside. I've moved into the workshop now to finalise the fitment of the gland onto the cable, and I've gathered together a few bits and pieces to help me with this. I've got the body of the gland completely assembled as we did just now with the hose clamp already in place. I've got the strength member retention boss ready to go on at the appropriate time. I've got a shifting spanner set at 36mm to tighten this gland nut. I've got a socket, a 7mm socket to tighten the hose clamp, and I've got a posi driver to tighten this boss up when we get to it. I've also got a texter, some black electrician's tape, and a tape measure to measure where we're at. The first thing we need to do is to get the cable, and this is the cable that we're going to fit the gland to, and I've marked out the cable where we're going to strip it back to. Most of the Prismian joints require to strip 2 meters of cable, so I've made a mark on the cable, perhaps a bit difficult to see here, at 2 meters. I've also made another mark on the cable 90mm up from the 2 meter mark, and this is to help us position the gland properly on the cable. You don't have to do it, but it does make it a lot easier if you do. So the next stage is to remove this section of the sheath. This is the sheath we're going to strip back, and once we've removed that we can fit the gland. But before we do that, I'm going to slide the gland over the cable, because it's much easier to slide the gland over before we strip it than afterwards. So I've got the gland complete with the hose clamp sliding over the cable, and we'll just slide this up and over so it's out of the way while I strip the cable. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten the gland a little bit just to hold it in place so it doesn't keep sliding up and down the cable and get in the way. So I've done that now. Stripping the cable is the subject of another Prismian fibre optic how-to video, and I recommend that you actually look at that video. But I'm going to go away now and strip this cable and show you how to finish off this gland. Okay, you can see here that I've now stripped the sheath off the cable. I've left about 200mm of Kevlar. This is what we're going to use to anchor the gland onto the cable. And the first step then is to put some silicone grease on this space on the first 90mm up to the mark that we made before. And that just goes on there. We don't need much, just a little bit. And what this does is it allows the sealing gland to sit down comfortably onto the cable. So having done that, we can then slide the gland forward, and the correct position is that the back end of this torsional clip lines up with the 90mm mark. Having done that, you can then just tighten the gland up a bit, not fully, just tighten it a bit just to hold it in place. Then the next thing we need to do is to fit the strength member retaining boss. That's this part here that we haven't used up until now. So this goes onto the bracket, and there's a screw there. And we just leave the screw very loose to start with, because what we need to do is we're going to trap the Kevlar between the bracket and the boss. Now, what is important is that we make a rope out of the Kevlar, and it's important that we twist it anti-clockwise. Looking at the cable as I am here, we make a rope twisting it anti-clockwise. Then, having twisted it anti-clockwise, what we can do is we can start to wrap it around between the bracket and the boss, and we go 1 3/4 turns. So there's one turn, and then we're going to go around another 3/4 a turn here. Then we take the posi driver and tighten this screw up, and this needs to be tight because it traps the Kevlar between the boss and the bracket, and this is what anchors the cable. So having done that, we can then cut off the residual Kevlar so it's neat, like that. Okay, so what I like to do then is we've got to tighten this gland nut up fully, and what I like to do is to push forward the gland so that the Kevlar here is nice and tight, so it's immediately taking up the strain if the cable comes under strain. And then we can tighten this nut. Now it depends how tight it is, how strong you are. It needs to be tight. Sometimes you need to use a shifting spanner. I've managed to do it pretty well just by hand now. You can see that's in place, this Kevlar is tight. And the last bit then is to just tighten this hose clamp up. And for that, a 7mm socket on a nut driver is pretty good. Saves you spearing a hand with the screwdriver if it slips off. So just tighten this up, and it then holds the gland a bit more onto the cable. So that's nice and tight. And then the final step is just to put some black PVC tape around the hose clamp to protect your fingers from the sharp edges. Doesn't need much, just a couple of turns around so you don't jag your fingers. And that's it. And there we have it, completely fitted. And this will then be inserted into the base of either an LMJ or one of the smaller joints, the CMJ or the MMJ. I was just going to show you quickly how to install the gland that we've just fitted to the cable into the base of a joint. Now this is the small base from the CMJ or the MMJ joint, but the LMJ, the larger base, is exactly the same. The first thing you need to do is to remove a port blanking plug to insert the gland. Now these two plugs have already been removed, but I'll just show you how to take this one out. Now if you can see inside here, there are two tabs here and here, and you simply compress those with your fingers and push the blanking plug out. So I'll do that now, and you can see it comes out quite easily. There's a rubber O-ring on the plug there to seal it when it's in the base. And then we need to just slide the gland in its place. So all I've done is I've just taped up the ends here so we can feed them through easily and quickly. Now what is important is to make sure that when we push this gland home that it clicks into place, and you normally hear a loud click when it goes. You might have to wiggle it a bit, but you must make sure you can hear the click when it goes home fully. I'll just do it now. You hear that click? That's exactly what you need to have, and there's no way that's going to come back out of that base. Then the last thing you need to do is just to make sure this nut is fully tight. We tightened it before, but I'm just going to see if I can get a bit more on it, and you can just see that I've got, well, less than a quarter of a turn, but it's important to make sure that we do just do that last bit of tightening there to make sure that it doesn't leak in service. And that's really it.